once I get honed in on something, like I won't sleep for days until I figure it out. Like legitimately, I won't eat. I'm just so focused on the thing. Like I have to get that done.
Just because I'm curious how someone goes from not being a high school graduate to working on floors to being a software engineer for Microsoft.
If you say you're going to do it. And if you can't get it done, then own it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Schooling Struggle Podcast. The way that we set the format up for this show is that Todd and I have a Google Doc. It's called Podcast Fodder. And as things creep into our mind about possible topics that we might want to talk about, we just type them in and we go through it and we pick the topic for the evening. And I hit him up shortly after last Monday's recording. And I said, hey, here's what I want to do for the next pod. I want to do a deep dive into your journey. And he responded something like, what do you want to do that for? And I was like, I just have a lot to learn about your journey. There's a lot that I really want to dig into. And I think your story is awesome. And he wrote back something to the effect of, my journey is winding. And that intrigued me even more. What's up, Todd?
Hey, what's up, Peter? Thanks for having me.
How's life on the left coast?
Well, it's good. I was in a turkey coma for a few days. I ate horribly. That struggle's real. But yeah, I'm going to try to clean it up till Christmas and then we'll see what happens. But over on the left, it's all right. How about the right?
Nice. Yeah, same. I actually went no processed sugar from July 31st to Thanksgiving and crushed some pie and really had a pretty profound headache. Yeah. But it was definitely worth it. It was absolutely worth it. And then the day after, we got our first snow of the winter. Ooh. And my daughter and I went out sledding and built little snowmen and the whole thing. So
it wasn't like a left coast snow. It was a actual snow event.
It was only a couple inches, not enough to make an impact around here, but good times all in all.
Nice work.
So getting back to the focus at hand tonight, actually, when thinking about it, realized that I know very little about your journey, and the little that you share with me is really cool, in my opinion, and really intriguing. And as you described it, winding. So I want to kind of walk down that winding path right now as we chat and talk about whatever it is that you want to share regarding how you got from the day you came out of the womb to sitting here having an awesome conversation with me this evening.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot to condense.
Yeah, so I think where I'd love to start is just to ask the real kind of basic stuff, like where you're born, where you grew up, that kind of stuff. Let's start there.
Let's start with my working memory sucks. So if you ask me a whole bunch of questions at one time, I'll forget it by the time I get to the end of the first question. So let's start with that. I was born in Tacoma, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle, about 50 miles south, in a little subsection of Tacoma called Midland, which is just a neighborhood, I guess you could call it, in Pierce County in Tacoma, Washington. So, see, I already forgot the other questions.
So I did not prepare you for this at all, but I'm about to drop this on you. It's going to take a moment, but what is the very first memory that you have? The very first thing you can remember about anything at all?
Yeah, the very first memory I have, when I was a kid, when I was 4, we moved to, well, no, it's going to be before that. I don't know how old I was. I was pretty young. I do know that. And maybe 2 or 3. And my sisters were sick and my mom stayed at home with us, and there was a lightning storm going on outside, which doesn't happen very often here in Washington, but it was a real crasher because I remember it. I remembered a storm when I was that young, and I never remembered that anyways. And my sister was sick with chickenpox, I think. And so my mom was busy taking care of her, and the rest of us were running around, and I'm pretty high energy, and I guess I was from day one. So she was chasing us around with medicine that would hopefully we wouldn't get sick or something. I mean, I'm probably getting this completely wrong, but the moral of the story was, I remember my mom chased me under the kitchen table to give me this medicine and try to pull me out of there, and stood up really fast and hit her head, and it knocked her out. And I remember looking at my mom knocked out on the floor with like this, you know, it was like syrup medicine, you know, like the red, bright red syrup medicine, and it spilled all over her face, and it was just a mess. And I remember my sister looking at me like, like, what have you done? And I was like, oh no, like I killed my mom. So I remember that, but obviously she came to and woke up. But that was one of the first memories I think I ever had. And there was another one when I lived in New York. I moved to Albany, New York when I was 4, and I remember my sister's telling me that if you stood on top of the swing set, like really high on your toes, you could see Mount Rushmore from there. And I always thought, oh, I could just see it. I could see it. And there's no way I was going to see Mount Rushmore from Albany, New York. But so, yeah, those are two
That is
early memories.
amazing. I would think you're in a very, very small group of people whose first memory is thinking that you killed your parent. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Maybe that
So
explains
you
a
have
lot.
so you have sisters?
I have 2 sisters, both my elder. Jennifer was born in 1971 and Melissa was born in 1972.
So you're
And
the
then I was
baby of
born
the
in
family.
76. Yep. I'm the baby.
Hmm. And growing up, did you play sports or you said you were active?
Yeah. So, yeah, my story gets crazy around age.
Let's just go right to the craziness, skip the boring
Yeah, I mean,
stuff.
there's so many facets of crazy, but we can review the craziest ones. So, a big part of my life has been being diagnosed with ADHD, and so the earliest thing I remember when I lived in California. So, it's important to know. I moved around a lot because my dad worked for the prison system. So everywhere that I went, there was a prison, right? And
What did he do for the prison system?
not that he was in the prison system, but he worked for the prison system. He's always been in like mechanical engineering, like the services end of maintenance and stuff like that within prisons.
Huh,
So
fascinating.
when we lived in Albany, there was Otisville, and then we lived I guess we lived in Otisville, which was near Albany, and then in California we lived in a small town called Santa Maria, which was very close to Lompoc, where there's also a federal prison. So at most of the places that I lived, including Washington, there was a federal and now a state and now not a prison on an island that I lived for when I lived on when I was born. So where
Did
there's
you
also
ever
a penitentiary.
did you ever go into the prisons like as a young kid?
No, not that I
No.
remember. They kind of got they kind of got guidelines around bring your kid to work day in the prisons. So no, but we did live on the island when I was born, and so we were always around prisons. And being stuck on an island with a prison has a whole another podcast of nuggets. Uh, but here it goes. So I can't remember the question. Say this how
So
my
you
mind went.
said the crazy stuff happened when you were around 8.
Yeah. So when I was 8, I was diagnosed with ADHD because I was so much different than my sister. So they were very well-behaved valedictorians. I mean, like my parents are like, what happened what happened here? Like this kid's way different, right? And so early on, I was pretty much labeled with high energy, right? Like we got to get this kid doing something because he's way different. Like he has way more energy. He can't sit still. Blah blah blah. All these things. And so I did play sports against my will. I played t-ball and I played soccer and baseball. And then in high school and middle school, I ran. But I was always, they always tried to keep me busy. My dad used to run a lot, like just for fun. I mean, he's a lot like me now in retrospect, but he would run 100 miles, 40 miles, like for no apparent before running was cool. Like he would just go run with his buddies at school. And so when I was very young, he used to take me running to try to get the energy out of me before the day started. And he wanted to run anyways in the morning. So it was fantastic. But yeah, I'd always been pretty busy, kept pretty busy physically from a young age.
Huh. Yeah, and for the listeners that don't know, Todd just completed walking 100 miles in
I
3
did.
days
That was,
to raise money for. You can speak to that really, really quickly.
yeah, it was for a nonprofit foundation called Quilts of Valor, who they create quilts for veterans and active duty of the U.S. military. So we walked 100 miles.
So you were active from very, very young until even last weekend when you did
Yeah.
that. And is there another running endeavor you're taking on right now that you were telling me about recently?
Yeah, actually,
Self-challenge?
I was trying to run. Well, there's backstory to that too, but was it 26 half marathons in a year? But the 100-mile walk kind of gave me a little interesting situation on my tendon on my foot. So I'm hoping I can bank those walks for the next, I don't know, a couple of weeks so I can heal that up. But once I get back to running, though, that's what I'll be doing. So yeah.
So has physical movement been an integral part of your life throughout?
I wouldn't say throughout. Like I mentioned, I didn't really want to play sports when I was a kid. I really enjoyed the games, but practice was not my forte, obviously for attention reasons. But um, I took a long time off from the time I ran cross country in my ninth grade at high school until I found CrossFit. So I mean, maybe a little bit before, but pretty close. Yeah. So there was a huge gap between, I don't know, 16 and 20, 30, 30, let's say. Yeah.
So you were running cross country in high school. How did high school go for you? Are your memories of high school blissful or
No.
challenging? Or
School as a whole was terrible for me. High school was entertaining only because I went there for social reasons. Once I realized that I wasn't going to, it's very hard living under a label and then having, for me anyways, like I started getting like the first thing. So ADHD, like this diagnosis has been through my life, obviously since I was 8, but it came with, as a kid, it comes with different symptoms, right, that are easy to talk about now, but they're very hard to live. So like the walk of shame to the nurse's office to take your medicine that differentiates you from the rest of your classmates, and they don't know what you're talking about, and you don't know how to articulate that. And then from going to look at ink blots at school to see if you're disabled so you could get special training. And it's like, all these things, they start to stack in your mind to build this persona of I'm vastly different than everybody around me, and I don't have an outlet by which to I want to be the same because I'm an adolescent, but I clearly have been labeled different. So what do you do with that, right? So school for me was always a stretch. I was a pretty good kid until about 7th grade, and then at
what
7th grade, so
what
go
age
ahead,
were you? What age did you start with medication?
at 8.
Okay.
So I've been eating methylphenidate since 8 years old, and yeah, and so 7th grade, like I was on a roll until 7th grade, and then I realized that there was a group of individuals who were welcoming of anyone who would want to join their ranks, and these are the kids that hang out smoking behind the high school or middle school at that
So
point.
they were self medicating,
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
and you jumped in with
Oh,
that
I jumped in
crowd.
both feet on that bandwagon for sure, and so
Yeah.
yep. And so I began drinking and I began smoking marijuana at a very young age, and then pretty much stopped taking the medication that I've been given to normalize me for so long, and went on a couple decade hiatus to figure out who I really was. So yeah.
So, man, I have so many questions.
Bring
This
it
is so
on.
fascinating. Yeah. So, making your way through your high school years, or were you still playing sports and like hanging out with people other than them?
Well, that's an interesting
Did you have
question.
boyfriends or girlfriends that you were interested
Right.
in? Did that play
So
a role?
yep. So the last year I really cared about school was probably halfway through my sophomore year, and I had realized through my own negligence and through um, the counselors at school that I wasn't going to make it to graduation if I didn't take a whole bunch of classes to backload. And this was my sophomore year, so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm pretty much doomed here. And so school didn't hold my interest whatsoever, and so I just decided, well, I'll just be done with school and I'll just enter the workforce. At the same time, I found a girlfriend and kind of explored the world of girls, which was pretty epic. But those two things obviously led me away from school, right? Like I could go home and do nothing all day, go to lunch at high school and see my friends, sneak in on campus, and then go home and spend time with my girlfriend before I just start that whole process over again, doing nothing to better myself. So,
Was your girlfriend engaged in extracurriculars as well,
oh yeah,
or was
yeah,
she?
oh yeah,
Yep. Okay.
we were running. It was all the same crowd. Yep.
So did you end up graduating from high school?
No, I didn't graduate. So I stopped in just shortly thereafter. I think I played the game. I showed up until my junior year, and then I was pretty much just started working. So
Man, so yeah, so you're a software engineer for Microsoft now
correct.
that didn't graduate from high school.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's fill the gap in
Well, that's
from
a big gap to fill. Uh, I always had, I give the props, I guess, mostly to my grandparents. Not to say that there's a not, my parents and everybody else along the way. Um, but my grandparents, instilled in me very early on, especially my mom's mom and my dad's dad. My mom's mom, Virginia was her name, Eleanor. She she grew up in the Great Depression, as most of our grandparents did, but she decided that she would be the most frugal person she could be, and so she would, for example, tear down buildings and straighten out all the nails and salvage all the wood. So we had things all over the place that were all over our, like our homestead where I grew up, that were, directly and very evidently because of her, right? Like she saved all this stuff, she did the action, and every time you needed a screw or a nail, you went to the surplus that she had created, and that's where you would find all the things. So you didn't have to go to the store. You didn't, you become self-sufficient doing these things. So I learned very early on that to you have to work hard, right? Like it's gonna take some work, and it's gonna take some, you're gonna have to do things you might not want to do, standing in the rain and burning stumps, but eventually that's going to pay you something in the end. And so I learned that from her. And my dad's dad, his name was Donald. He was, a very interesting fellow, but he was loaded with integrity. Like it was unbelievable the amount of integrity this man had. And I mean, it was to a point where he slept for all of the for all of the years that I'd been alive, in the garage, and my grandmother slept in the house. And I never really understood why until after he died. And it was because he had he had a thing about the way, my aunt, who I've never met, was raised. And, he was basically like, these are my values and these are the things. And my grandma couldn't get on board with that. So he said, oh, I'll just go sleep in the garage. And that went on for 40 years. Like it was the craziest thing. Right. And it's just like, well, and I remember I lived there one time, and he came upstairs where I was staying, and he's like, you got to go. And I was like, well, what do you mean I got to go? And he's like, this isn't working out. You're not getting any better. You're not doing anything for yourself. So leave. And I was just like, well, okay, And my grandma's like, I guess you got to go. You know how this works. And that was just very strange to me. But what I learned from that was always do what you always say what you're going to, do what you say, right? Like to an extreme, to a fault. Like if you say you're going to do it, do it. And if you can't get it done, then own it. And so those are the two pieces that have really laid my foundation for kind of the values that I use to navigate the world.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the terminology. Do not write verbal checks that you will not be able to cash.
Exactly.
Basically, don't say you're going to do stuff and not do it. So, how was your relationship with your parents during this time?
My relationship with my parents, even still, is very, complex and, very, what's the word? Awkward, dysfunctional, I guess is the best way. I held a lot of the baggage of being labeled as a kid, and throughout most of my, formative years, I guess, and the actions that they thought were my best interest. And it's not to say that I shove all this on them. I mean, they were doing the best they could. They're just parents, right? They have no way to know what they're supposed to do. And in retrospect, I mean, they did a lot of awesome things that helped me grow in ways that I wouldn't have had they just been like, well, I guess we're just going to put you on the doorstep and you're out of here, or just completely turned a blind eye to whatever was going on and just allowed it to happen. So, but we have spent a lot of time apart, and in that you begin to lose, like you lose those milestones of what's going on, and then sooner or later, then they'd start to disappear. And then when you try to rebuild them or you try to reinvigorate them, there's nothing there. There's no commonality there, right? So now my mom has Parkinson's, and she barely remembers who I am half the time I come over. And my dad, he's struggling to deal with that because he's watching his wife fall apart. And then my sisters, they might talk to us every, we have like a group chat on Christmas and a group chat on Thanksgiving, and then they send some pictures, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is that's mine to own. Like I could have done a lot better, but at the same time, I just live the life that I live. So not without regrets.
Yeah, I am blown away right now. What's interesting is, without knowing any of this backstory of all the people that I've met in my life, you were the one that I asked first to be a part of this podcast. called
Oh, we share some
Schooling
struggles.
Struggle, right?
You're
Yeah,
right.
and I had no idea the depth of any of this. It's really blowing my mind. It's crazy.
That's just scratching the surface.
So, at some point, did they give you the boot, or did you choose to move out? And then were you like in and out with grandparents and like different family members and
Yeah.
stuff, or did you?
So that's kind of a blur. When I was 16, 17, it must have been 17 because I wasn't yet 18. So when I was 17, they put me in foster care because they didn't know what to do with me. So they admitted me to foster care. How strange does that sound? So from from what seems like a normal family, I went away to foster care and lived in the foster system until I was 18. And then when I was 18, that girl I had talked about earlier, she moved to Florida. And so I moved with her and her mother to Florida and stayed there for a year and then completely screwed up my life financially down there. And so then came back to Washington and lived with my parents for a bit and then my grandparents.
So were you working like during this, like in your teens and stuff
Yeah.
while you were
Yep. So pretty much
getting
once
into?
I left high school, I got just odd jobs. I worked at a couple grocery stores. I washed dishes for a while, but I've always been like the lower level. And it doesn't bother me to do menial work, what other people see as menial. So
And were you always a hard worker in whatever endeavor you were in, or just kind of like, get the job and
no, I've always worked
go
hard.
through your
Yeah. I
shift?
mean,
Yeah.
some of the superpowers of neurodiversity, ADHD are, like high attention to detail and, seeing patterns and things and making sure that those patterns are met every time. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, I always worked hard. Every job I go to, I work as hard as I possibly can to do my best in that job and then to learn the aspects of how to be better. So
So then you're kind of, I don't know if even making your way through your teens is the right terminology to use, but you're getting through your
mm-hmm.
teens and then you get to your 20s.
Yep.
And so you came back from Florida, moved in with the grandparents, and then
Yep. And
where
then
do
I
we
had
go
a
from
daughter.
there?
Then I met another girl. So I left her in Florida. She came back for a bit. And then I came home, back to Washington. And then I met another girl and we had a daughter. And yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother chapter, but you choose the direction you want to go on that one.
So you have your daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously you stay in the area at that
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yep. So
And
I moved
yep,
in.
and
We moved in
then
with her parents, just
okay.
near here, not too far. But she was finishing high school, and then yeah.
So she was in high school when she gave birth.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And then so did you guys stay together and
Well, we stayed together for a year, and that wasn't going to work out.
okay.
And so I knew the things that I was doing was not going to be beneficial for a child, and then the rest of my life, like that, the way it was going was going to end not pleasantly. So we were always each other's throats. So I knew that wasn't going to work. And then I moved in with my youngest sister, so the second sister. And when I moved in with her, I met my wife now. So that's where I met Jocelyn. They were going to nursing school together.
So I have friends and I know people in my life that have said that their life was a mess until they had a kid.
Yeah.
And the kid inspired them to clean up and take positive steps forward. Is that the case for you as well?
Eventually, yeah, but not at first. So it was, I mean, obviously I wasn't planning to have a kid. So it's a shock. And then I was only 20, so I wouldn't say had sowed I've sowed lots of oats by then, but I hadn't sown the oats that were coming. And so it was very difficult. That's kind of the reasoning behind why I knew it wasn't going to be good, because I wasn't in a place mentally where I could be responsible for, I could barely be responsible for myself. There was no way in hell I was going to be able to have, a spouse and a daughter. So I figured, it would be better off if we just broke that off and let it go where it did. So
How long have you been married now?
I've been married 20 years, 21, maybe 2021.
And what were you doing with your time during that time when you met your wife, for work or for play
I
or
was,
whatever?
so I've always been very, I don't know why. I really enjoyed floor care, like scrubbing floors, washing floors, waxing floors, things like that. And so I'd done that for years just because it was something I became good at. And then I was doing that at a nursing home where my sister and Jocelyn worked as nurses. That's what I was doing at that point in time. And then I kept doing that for for years, probably another 4 or 5 years.
So you met Jocelyn, and you and Jocelyn had kids?
Yep, me and Jocelyn. Yeah, we have three boys. To answer your question, though, eventually in a long roundabout kind of way, there was a point in time. I think it was about the time Quentin was born, maybe a little bit before with Caitlin, but where I realized that these kids are going to need more than just child support, or they're going to need more than just an everyday kind of or every other weekend kind of dad, and that wasn't going to be something that I was going to be able to slough off, right? And like especially as I kept having kids, like me and Jocelyn, obviously we fit very well together, and so living the life of being a stepmother is not easy, but she helped me understand the ways that my being a parent to our sons could just be extended to Caitlin, and you can just pick up the slack and look back on it and learn from it and then move forward. So that's it was a kind of a wake up in a lot of ways.
This is going to sound really stereotypical, but like when I met you, if you would have told me, oh yeah, like I went to private school and I was valedictorian, I went to Ivy League, and now I'm, doing all these things, I'd be like, oh, well, that makes sense. And then to hear this backstory, to now learn about all these things that you are currently doing, what was the driver, or what was I don't even know if switch is the right word, because it might have always been there, or the reflection that you've done. Like you have struck me since our first conversation as a very, very introspective, reflective human being. And where does that come from?
I think that I don't know if there was a day that there was a switch. Like for all of the things that you've said, which are very kind, I think that I never back down from a challenge where I feel like there is something that can benefit somebody else, regardless of how hard I have to try, because it becomes interesting to me, right? Like, oh, I wonder how I could start a business. Oh, I wonder how many licenses I need to get. Oh, I wonder what the labels, like those things are all facets of interest to me. The end goal is the thing that a lot of times I fail to see, but I know that if somebody says that would really help me, then I'm more apt to look for those challenges and go in that direction. So most of the things that I've done that others see as notable, I think are things that have come through that filter of how can I help somebody else, or how can I make an impact somewhere that I see a need for. Does that make sense? I don't know if that answered your question, but
Like when a dude from Vermont calls you up and says, "Hey, I'm going to launch this podcast. Will you help me?"
Yeah, right. It's kind of like that. Or when this guy from Tacoma says, "Hey, fitness isn't working in my school district. How can you help?" Right? The same kind of thing.
So one thing that I'd love to touch upon is when I asked Todd to do this podcast thing with me, I was very blunt with him, and I told him, "Hey, this is something I've wanted to do for 5 years, and the reason why I haven't done it is just straight up because I'm scared. I believe that the only excuse we have is the one we make, and I was making one excuse after another as to why I wasn't going to launch this thing. And I said, here's what I'm going to ask of you: just hold me accountable. Reach out to me whenever you feel like, and say, hey, what's the progress on this thing? Where are we?" And so a week after I asked him to join me on this, I received a text. I remember exactly where I was standing and what I was looking at when I saw the text. I was out in the field, and it said, "How's the progress going?" And I had to text back, "I have done nothing." So the next week goes by again. "How's the progress going?" And I made an excuse like, "Oh, school's busy right now. I'm not able to really give it the attention it needs. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it right." All this jargon that I was just being really self-guarded about. And he's like, "Okay," with all the patience in the world. And we did this for about 4 weeks. And then finally I realized, like, next time he texts, I got to have something, at least something. So I YouTubed a video, how to start a podcast. So when he texted, I was like, yep, I started the research on how to figure this thing out. And you just were so patient, but you were persistent and relentless with letting me know, hey, I'm here and we're doing this thing. Hey, I'm here, we're doing this thing. And I just think that little story right there about how we started this thing is a real microcosm of who you are and your willingness to kind of help move other people forward. And since I bought all this recording gear, and we really decided, okay, like this is for real, I have learned so much in the last month. And I I didn't know anything about any of this, and now we have podcasts out for the world to hear, and it's just like because you've motivated me to be a better kind of version of myself, and I'm so grateful for that. So I can just see that leaking over and spilling over into your fitness and your work and your family and all that kind of stuff, and your willingness to be incredibly insanely humble and be vulnerable is really inspiring for me, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm not one who really gets caught up in the glam of people's careers. I think health is wealth, and if we have people that love us and we have people that we love, like that's all we really need. Um, but I am fascinated by the fact that you were scrubbing floors or cleaning floors or doing floors when your first child was born, and now here you are sitting here talking to me as a software engineer, talking me through, hey, this is how you got to check your microphone. Hey, this is the stuff that you need on the tech end to be able to pull this podcast off. Can you just walk me through that piece? Just because I'm curious how someone goes from not being
Yeah.
a high school graduate to working on floors to
Yeah,
being a software engineer for Microsoft.
yeah, it's a very interesting turn of events, really. It's one that I'm very fortunate to have had in multiple ways. When I was young, um, I don't even know how old I was. 8, 9, 10. I don't even know how old. My dad brought home, it was called an Odyssey. It was like a gaming console from days long past. And my grandparents had a ColecoVision. And as any normal, I don't know about normal, but as any kid of my day and age, like video games were completely a new thing. And, you could spend countless hours watching little bits across the screen and, being challenged by these things. And so, I've sunk into that. And then pretty soon he got an Apple IIc, which was really the first computing I'd ever done. And from there, it kind of evolved. My sister bought a computer when she was in high school. And I would tear things apart and I would get into there to figure out how it worked. And it was just fascinating to me. I could find the flow. I could be in that thing for hours, just being challenged, like mentally,
So
like how does this work?
you had this workable computer that was a fairly rare thing. Not everybody had one of those in their houses. I certainly didn't have one, and you would just pull it apart.
Well, I don't not physically pull it apart, but I was very interested in how it worked internally. So I would read books about how to program them, and I would read books about, how the graphics work, and like understanding as best I could all of the components that made this thing, take the input, give it, and then do something actual. It was it's fascinating to me, still is. And so, so I'd always been interested in computers, and then, I went away to Minnesota, became a garbage man. I field planes on SeaTac Airport. I've done so many different jobs, right? But I always had this underlying curiosity about like these technologies. And so when it finally came to a head, my brother-in-law was working at Microsoft, and he was like, "Hey, we need these vendors to do this work." And I was like, "Oh, well, whatever." He's like, "You should come up and try, because I know you're interested in this stuff." A long time ago. And I was like, "Well, it's been years, like decades have flown by since, I don't know about decades, but a long time had come by." And so I said, whatever. So I came up there, and it was that interest on a global, like the scale was so large. Like there's computer labs, right? Like with high density racks of, thousands of computers. And he's like, "Well, we need to install something on every one of those." And I was like, "Well, there's a challenge, right? Let's see how we could do that." And so I really came into it with very little knowledge, working knowledge of how this worked. But because I found it so fascinating, I just became a tenacious learner about how I could implement even the smallest little thing, and then begin to stack those things up. And then along the way, I think one of the other things to my success has been obviously that work ethic, like which is part of ADHD and a lot of neurodiversity is, once I get honed in on something, like I won't sleep for days until I figure it out. Like legitimately, I won't eat. I'm just so focused on the thing, like I have to get that done. And so some people might call that an inadequacy, but you call it what you want. But the other side of I think what is really helped augment, I guess, my traversal of 20 years is it's profound how, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but how the degree of lack of common sense in people who are highly intelligent, I have been able to fill gaps there in people's personalities where they didn't think that they would run into somebody like me. at a place like that. So for an example, I might be working next to, actual rocket scientists or like doctors, like doctors of computer science. And we'll go out to like a morale event or a party or something, and they will be so socially awkward that they're not sure how to fit in. And I'm just like, oh, come on, let's go see what this is all about. Right. And then like integrate them to, a group of individuals, and then allow them. I don't want to make it sound like it's, like it's egotistical, but like somehow light something up in them where they realize it wasn't as hard as they thought it was going to be to just go talk to somebody.
Wow, I'm just hanging on every word. That's so cool. Yeah, it's funny. Before I came down in the basement to record the pod tonight, I said to my wife, "I'm fired up about tonight's pod because I get to kind of do a deep dive into Todd's winding journey, as he called it." And I said, the only thing that I really remember him talking about his past is how he was once a garbage man and now he's a software engineer for Microsoft. I really want to connect that gap.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's fascinating. And I think what's really, for me, what's really neat is, um, I always tell my students, if we're willing to work hard and treat people well, we can do anything in this world.
absolutely.
And I think you're, a real representation of that. Obviously, you're willing to work hard. The saying, one of the sayings that I love, and you can see I have a lot of these cliches because they just stick in my mind, and they're really helpful when talking to people, is that failure cannot cope with persistence. And that's a lot of what you've been living and experiencing. But the thing is, you're in this kind of tech world, but where it seems to me where you find your good feelings or where you find purpose and fulfillment is in connecting with people in ways that help them, whether
Absolutely.
it's overcoming the awkward conversation at the company party or helping them with a work task. And you shared with me that your role at Microsoft has changed over the years, but one of your roles was actually to help, and you can word this much better than I can, but what was it, to help people in like the culture of the company
Yeah.
or to provide assistance? It almost sounded to me like the equivalent to like a special educator in a school,
I
what
guess
you were
you could
doing.
kind of call it that. Yeah. Basically, we like the job was to create frameworks that would allow people to show up to work as themselves, which is it was a cakewalk for like every day I went to work. It was just it was like bells and whistles, like unicorns and rainbows. I loved it. It was the best thing. Like you get to talk to people all day long about what interests them, and then try to find or create ways that they can do that at work and feel like successful. I think that's the most beautiful thing ever.
When you think back on the layers of struggles that you've overcome or pushed through or are still dealing with in your life, what are I don't even know how to word this question. What are some struggles or a struggle that you feel has been a real benefit to you in the long run? Something that you had to overcome, push through, embrace, deal with at one point in your life that's now paying dividends in positive ways.
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, Immediately, what comes to mind is flipping the perspective or flipping the frame on the label that I've carried for so long into being able to use that to relate to people who are like me and be able to help them to be able to share my experience with what that's been like. Because and I say that because I felt like being diagnosed with what living with that burden of that label, even, I mean, whatever it is, has allowed me to find within myself things that other people may or may not have or may or may not know. And so especially at work, nowadays, what gives me energy is to show people who didn't know that this was a part of their life until they were 40, that there is so many facets of awesomeness that you have missed. Not only that, like it becomes, it's very interesting to watch somebody be diagnosed with something that they knew they lived with their whole life, but they'd never been able to know what it was. And then there's like a brief moment of grief, almost like as if they've lost something, like, oh, like this answers so many questions. And then immediately they jump to, but if I would have known this 20 years earlier, but then allowing them that time to digest that, and then saying, yeah, but look at all of this that it offers, and like showing them an entire new landscape where they had just seen darkness before. Like that's the biggest thing that that jazzes me up. And that's, I think, that lifelong struggle of understanding exactly what that means in order now to just use that as an exemplar for somebody else, I think is really what, that's the biggest struggle that I haven't overcome it, but it's one that's paid me the best return.
So I'm hearing you have this theme of the kind of the ADHD diagnosis you've had to carry, and I shared earlier in pods mine earlier in conversations in this podcast that mine was just been the physically smallest, weakest person in any room I walked into, and that drive, that Napoleon complex, or whatever you want to call it, has been crazy and super super helpful for helping me get closer to the things that I want to achieve. And I think some of our struggles kind of come and go quickly, and some just linger forever. And that's one that's lingered with me forever. I'll still now at 180 pounds look in the mirror and see 115-pound junior in high school. It's just always there.
Yeah.
And if we can take that, embrace it, and do cool stuff with it, we can really, really feel purposeful and fulfilled. And I obviously have no clue how you view yourself, but I view you as a very, very amazing contributor to communities and someone who's living with that purpose and fulfillment that so many people are seeking. So
Huh.
it's awesome.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, to me, it's very, I don't think you have to trade something, right? I think that I truly believe that there's like a life barter that you have to give up in some ways, or you have to navigate any ways, right? And it's like, yeah, I didn't. It's so weird how other people see you, and especially for me, like I don't see any of that in myself. Is the strangest part about this struggle for me. It's like I know I do these things, but I tell people this all the time. Like I just do what I feel other people should do, and it's they're like, oh, and I know that that's damning. And I've been working on like being able to tell that, like accept that gratitude and accept like their words and their like their I don't know what it is, but accept what they have to say instead of just be like, no, everybody should do that, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I really struggle with like seeing that and accepting it. It's a weird thing. Right. So maybe that shapes the way that we look at the people in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. You're crushing it. It's just awesome. So, thanks for being vulnerable, and thanks for sharing this story with us, and for taking us down the winding road. Lots of stuff for us to chat about in the future regarding some of the segments of your story. But I'm super, super.
Hopefully
super
you're up next, because I haven't even dove into the old land of Peter yet, so I can't wait.
Cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed Todd's story as much as I did. Really fascinating stuff, and lots of stuff for us to dig into in the future. So hope you all have an awesome rest of your day. Thanks for your ears. Stay strong. Todd and Pete are out.
See ya.
Peace.